Good morning, everybody. Happy to see everybody here for the data conference. Thank you for sitting up front and not doing the class thing of sitting back. She's like, yeah, that's okay. I got to get prizes for that. The not sitting in back row prize. That's okay. Feel free, come on in, get food. We got plenty of snacks. They're all for you guys. I'm Mike Sharkey. I'm the Executive Director of Data and Analysis in the Enterprise Technology Group. Thank you very much for being here. This is the 2022 ASU Data Conference. Really excited to be here and just to have this chance to connect with the whole community across ASU. It's a great bunch and really enjoy having this time to be able to do that. Quick story, last week there was a conference in Denver called EDUCAUSE. EDUCAUSE is the premier higher ed technology coalition, and they do this report called the Horizon Report, where they look out and say, what are some things on the horizon that are going to have a big impact? And this year they did a specialty Horizon Report on data and analytics. And these bullet points you see here are key technologies and practices that will have a significant impact on higher ed data and analysis. And a colleague shared this with me, and I was going through it and looking, and if you look across of what we do here at ASU, on almost all of these measures, we do a really good job. We are really far ahead, especially compared to our peers. And that makes me proud. It makes me proud that we have so many practitioners here that excel in these areas, because as we know, leveraging data, using data to help our students is something that's extremely important. And so this was a nice measure. It was good to see like this validation that the things we were doing really kind of made an impact. I kind of have that imposter syndrome. Like I always think like, yeah, we're doing good things, but other people are doing like better things than us. We're just kind of good and average. That's not the case with this. Like if anyone here talks to colleagues at other institutions and talks about data and things we're doing, you'll quickly find like we're the lead scout. We're far ahead. People are like, oh, I wish we could do that. You've got a great data warehouse. You've got these tools. You can publish dashboards. I have a guy with a laptop that just does a couple of things and emails PDFs to people. I encourage you, if you haven't already, to have those conversations with colleagues. And like I said, you'll soon find out that what we're doing is pretty incredible. So that's a really good testament to all of us. So here we are. We are at the data conference. 5 years ago, this was started. Kristen Kennedy, who is here, took the initiative out of what was the University Technology Office, is now Enterprise Technology. And our names changed. We're now Enterprise Technology, but the core of what this conference is about hasn't changed. A couple of things. One, this is by you and for you. The sessions that we'll be having throughout the day are given by all the practitioners here in the room, meant for all the practitioners here. That hasn't changed. The community building, knowledge sharing, I'm hoping you all take this time, whether it's now, whether it's in sessions, between sessions, to get to know folks you haven't met. Everyone here knows ASU, we're pretty kind of diverse and federated, and I'm in Fulton Engineering and I didn't know that the folks in WP Carey were doing that. That's great, we should chat. This is a great venue for those, so please take the time to network and know some of your colleagues here. So speaking of enterprise technology, I just want to recognize the members on the data team and enterprise technology are responsible for a lot of these things. And if folks who are in the room, the enterprise technology data folks, stand up just real quick. Stand up, Dixon, that's sitting down. Come on, man. Anyone else? Lucas, come on, I see you. Folks, these are folks on the team. Sam, Todd, Haley, Bob, you guys help support these things and develop these things and the tools that you use. And so I want to make sure that the team here knows the impact they're having by sharing those things. You know, I talk to the team and say what we do supports the other departments in the organizations in ASU. And you pull up the charter and you talk about student success, and I always say the things that we do help all the other folks here in the departments, help students succeed, help meet the goals of our charter. And also, you know, talking about the economic, social, and overall health of communities. And I'll come back to that for our keynote speaker today. But before I introduce our keynote, let's just do some logistics. So this is how the 2 days are going to flow. That's to this morning and tomorrow morning. So we're in here for the keynote now. We've got sessions for 2 hours after this. Lunch is on your own today. So we're not providing lunch today. We decided to provide a really good lunch tomorrow. We didn't do the box lunches. We're like, that's kind of cheaping out. Let's do the good lunch. So one lunch provided, but it's a good lunch. So today you get to go down to Chick-fil-A and Payway and everything else if you want and grab some lunch. And then sessions afterwards. Tomorrow, there is no kickoff convening keynote. So tomorrow, 9:30, heading right to the sessions. And then in this room tomorrow from noon till about 2, it'll be lunch and it'll be our sliced data competition that I'll talk about in a sec. So this is how the flow of the day goes. After we're done here, everyone's going to go to the sessions. There's documents that were handed out that has what sessions are where. So hopefully this gets everyone oriented. You know where you're going to be. Here are today's session schedules. The QR code on there is the same thing. It leads to the document you have if you got it at registration. So if you have the schedule of sessions today, yeah, you don't need this QR code, but if you want, go ahead and grab it. So that's where everyone is going after we leave this session at about 10 o'clock, about 5 of 10, so you can get to where you're going. The sessions, there's little icons on there for 30-minute, 60-minute, 2-hour sessions. If you didn't get that, there's a legend, so you can see if you're going to go to an hour long or 2 half-hour ones. So we trust everyone to figure that out on their own. And then tomorrow, this is the same PDF for tomorrow's schedule. Remember, there's no convening, no need to be here in the morning. 9:30, head right to the first session that you're going to. And then after, during lunch, so what's going to happen is everyone's back here, 11:45, 12-ish, come in here for lunch, we'll have everything set up. And during lunch, for your entertainment, we will have a live data competition. So we did this last year. So last year, we had a food theme. So as we were talking through it, we said, you know, they have Chopped for the food competition. We should do Sliced for a data competition. And we did. And so we had teams sitting in tables up front while everybody was here eating, and they're given data and they're given a question, and they need to answer that question with a visualization. And so tomorrow, we will have these 3 teams up in front for your entertainment, little gladiator style. They've been given a data set, and I will give them a question tomorrow, and they will have about 45 minutes or so to an hour to work on that while they're sitting here. And then when they're done, they're going to give a quick 5-minute presentation to all of you and to judges, and we've got prizes for the winners and the contestants. So tomorrow you get free food and free entertainment. So there's really no excuse for you not to be here tomorrow. I don't know how many conferences do that where, yeah, you get the thing where like Bon Jovi plays at Disneyland at night, but that's not cool. Like having people doing data right here while you watch, that's cool. So that's what we have for us tomorrow. All right, given all that, I want to introduce our keynote speaker. So this is I mentioned before about our charter, and charter has that information about we have a responsibility for the communities we serve. You've noticed the Lego theme that we've had for the conference, and that's really about building a foundation for data, building a foundation for data analysis. And when you think about it, there's no really more fundamental foundational piece than internet connectivity, because if you don't have that, there really isn't a lot you can do. And so given that, I wanted to introduce our keynote speaker. So Dr. Erin Carr-Jordan is a colleague of mine. She's the managing director of the Digital Equity Institute. Honored to be able to call her a colleague of mine in enterprise technology. And she's agreed to come here today and share her perspective on digital equity and digital inclusion. So with that, please welcome Dr. Erin Carr-Jordan.
Probably shouldn't have worn heels. I'm like all stompy. Good morning. How's everybody doing? Come on. Good morning. How's everybody doing? Excellent. There's a lot of food over there. I was pretty excited when I walked in. I'm a big pumpkin bread fan. And thank you so much for the warm introduction. I appreciate it a great deal. It is an absolute honor to be colleagues with you, to be part of the enterprise technology team, and to have been invited to come here and talk today. So I hope it's going to be a fun morning. If it's not, don't tell me. It might hurt my feelings. But I get to talk to you about this thing about which I am incredibly passionate. I'm Erin Carr-Jordan. I'm the managing director of the Digital Equity Institute. The Digital Equity Institute is a 501c3. Nonprofit organization. It works in a sector and stakeholder agnostic way to help the state address digital equity at scale. It's a big thing. Like, works in a sector and stakeholder agnostic way to make sure that the state can address digital equity at scale, which sounds kind of ominous. In addition to that, I have the privilege of holding the role within the Enterprise Technology Office of the Executive Director of Digital Equity and Social Impact, which basically means that my job is to help make sure that the programs that we build and the activities in which we engage do the most amount of good for the largest amount of people for the longest amount of time. That's a lot. It keeps me up at night in the best of ways. So I figured we would start today. Am I talking too loud, by the way? Okay, so I figured we would start today with a little bit of interactive activity here, because passive and just having me sit up here and talk isn't necessarily very fun for me, and it certainly isn't very engaging for you. And I'm an educational psychologist, so I like the idea of engaging with folks. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is, what the heck is digital equity? It's this thing that we hear a lot. If you've been at ASU recently, I am sure that you have heard the words digital equity. There's a big grant that we were just awarded in Maricopa County. It was $34.6 million. That is a lot. But what do you think it is about? So what the heck do we mean when we say digital equity? I'm going to give you a chance to respond. And just so you know, this is part of a feedback loop for a planning process that we are engaged in. So collecting these data will help us to make sure that we're doing it right. So all of it is iterative. Here we go. Internet access for everyone. Everyone has access to information. Learning. Access for all. Digital divide. Data supports the needs of all communities. Everyone has access. Free the data. Okay. There's a running theme here, and it's fantastic because it is deeply aligned with the definition that we use. We pull our definition from a group called the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, which is NDIA. They are widely acknowledged to be the organization that was among those founding this work. So they've been doing it for decades, and basically they said we need common language so that when everyone comes to the table, we're speaking from the same lexicon. So free the data. I like the free the data. Okay, these are going to keep coming in. I'm going to let them roll just for another minute because I think it's really important. So as we're working on planning, by the way, part of what we're doing is saying, what the heck does digital equity mean? So the state has to have a plan. And the plan is to address digital equity across the entirety of the state. It's a big state. Very big state, 15 counties, lots and lots of people, rural, remote, tribal, urban, suburban. So we have to help the state be prepared to meet the needs of communities across the entirety of the state. That's part of what digital equity is. But if we're not actually using the same language to begin with, we might be rowing in different directions. So this actually gets us a step there. And so as we go back and we contribute to the state and the work that they're doing, we can say, this is what digital equity means to the community. And this is a very particular community within a higher education environment, but doing work around data. So you are among the folks who's measuring this stuff. So if we're not speaking the same language from the very beginning, we might be measuring the wrong things. So I'm going to skip over. The definition that comes to us from NDIA is that digital equity is a condition in which everyone, I say it everyone, I'm so used to saying it, in which individuals and communities have the information technology capacity that they need to fully engage in every aspect of society, democracy, and the economy. Even that is really big. So just let's sort of sit and marinate in that for just a second. What they need to engage in every aspect of society, democracy, and the economy. How many of you, just a show of hands, have a phone with you today? How many of you have that phone and use that phone sometimes to check email? How many of you have a computer with you here today? How many of you have worked from home some of the time in the last year? Are we seeing the trend here? How many of you have used your computer to access your physician or a doctor or a clinician or a caregiver of some time in the last year? How many of you paid a bill online? Accessed your medical record online? Found out directions to something online? Got into a parking garage somehow with used a QR code? I tell you what, I rented a car the other day in San Diego and I was trying to check out, and to check out, they had to send you the email with the QR code on it, and the email never came through. So I was literally sitting there just waiting. And I found it both annoying and terrifying because I feel very comfortable using technology and was completely fine with receiving that QR code and then using that QR code to get out of the parking garage. As it was, because it never came, I was sort of trapped. I was just there for like 15 minutes with my kids, not so happy about it. But imagine if you have never used the internet. Imagine if you don't know how to both receive an email, if you don't have email. How many of those processes, the things that we just, everyone in this room, I would say the overwhelming majority, let's do this. Is there anyone who didn't raise their hand for one of those questions? One. Not singling you out, by the way. But so it is an anomaly to have one of those things that you don't do frequently. And so just imagine for a second, if we get back to this definition, which is that everyone has access to everything that they need to fully participate in every aspect of society, democracy, and the economy. All of those things that you would not have been able to do had you not have access. That's a big thing. So that is the lift that we are trying to accomplish on behalf of the state. And ASU has decided that we would lean in really heavily, like we're like leaning in to contributing to helping the state accomplish this goal. And we are specifically leaning in Maricopa County as a pilot project to make sure that everything that we build within Maricopa gets it right, so that we can then meaningfully contribute outside of this county. So that is the goal. This is the lift. So if we're talking about how many folks within the state of Arizona don't have access, currently lack access, 1.2 million. That's the high estimate of the number, but I actually think it's probably low. Lots of folks agree. I might be wrong, but either way, it is greater than 880,000 and up to 1.2 million. And I throw this number up there, and because we often work with numbers, we can get stuck in a space of like, that's a number, it's a big number. You know, we're used to hearing things like millions. In the world of data, big numbers are not unusual, right? We see them often. Just for a second, let's go back and think about who those 1.2 million people are, because what does it mean? It means people don't have access to the things that they need to go to school. Those are families. Those are elderly people who can't talk to their families. I mean, think about what it means for 1.2 million people in Arizona not to have access to the internet. So it's going to take every single person in this room and the full diversity of everyone in this room to make sure that we're understanding what needs to exist, what already exists that can be adapted or leveraged, or how we can actually work to make sure 1.2 million people do have access. So I just wanted to give you an idea of the gravity of what we're trying to accomplish or what we're trying to address. So while that number is big, we know millions of people do have broadband available to them, but they're not using it, right? You guys heard this before? That while people do have access, many people just choose not to use it. It's actually 3 times greater, where access exists and people are choosing not to use it for all kinds of reasons. We do have a little bit of data about why that is, because there have been people who have been in the communities asking these questions, seeking to better understand what the state of play is. So what we know is there are 3 primary causes. One is affordability. Everybody, raise your hand if you have internet at home. Raise your hand if you pay $50 a month or less. Raise your hand if you pay $75 or less. Raise your hand if you pay $100 or less. Raise your hand if your bill is more than $100 a month. Okay. Imagine if you can barely afford to put food on your table. So if you're thinking about, like, everybody knows Maslow's pyramid, right? Everybody knows the Maslow. Works really well if I'm using the microphone all over. So if we think about Maslow's hierarchy, we know that if you are worried about the basic human needs, right? If food, shelter, that kind of stuff, then where you decide to spend your money, the internet is not necessarily one of the places that you are likely to prioritize for all kinds of reasons. So getting at this affordability piece, making sure that everyone, regardless of where you are, regardless of your background or what you look like or any other thing that might be part of the consideration, that none of it matters because it is made affordable. So affordability is one of the most important things that we're seeking to address. There are these programs called Affordable Connectivity Program. ASU is part of a pilot. Did anybody see, like, the big signs? They were by the light rail, they were downtown, there were billboards. Anybody see it? I wish I had a slide about it. It was pretty cool. I was very excited about it. And we were part of a Boston consulting group overview that was what are the exemplar programs in this space. So addressing affordability comes from this ACP program. But part of what we need to measure and understand is, does ACP work? Does it work for the right folks? Can we reach them in a way that they are receptive to learning more about ACP? It's an arduous process to actually get through the application. It's very long, it's multi-step. So we launched a digital navigator program at ASU in the Experience Center. Does everybody know the Experience Center, folks? Anybody here from the Experience Center? No? Okay, they're amazing. If you get a chance, work with them. They're absolutely fantastic. So we basically took this group of folks who were already working with communities to better understand how to get access to the internet. And we said, how can we adapt their skills to address things like ACP and a lack of connectivity and the ability to actually get online through affordability. And so they have been working diligently to make ACP more widely available and to help people know that ACP programs exist. And I believe they've helped more than 3,000 people get onto the internet via ACP, which is a $30 discount, or if you're a member of a tribal nation, it's $75, which is significant. The other piece is trust. Lev says, and we've heard lots of other people say, we move at the pace of trust. That is so absolutely true, and I actually think it's the number one thing that we have to address, because if people don't trust the work that we're doing, they will not be receptive, full stop. So it means that we're not just talking to members of the community. It means that the community are deeply involved and engaged in all of the processes, which changes the way by which we measure how we're doing, right? Because then those are whole new dynamics that we're bringing into a situation. So the community is part of the planning table. We're going to the communities rather than inviting them to come see us. And so that means that the full diversity of the human population is part of the conversation and part of the planning around how do we do this right? Like if we're talking about making sure people have access to the internet and all of the things that they need to fully engage, all of the people need to be part of a conversation about what that looks like in their community. The community needs to be the driving voice. They are historically marginalized. The relationships that exist between them are often extractive and transactional, and most programs perpetuate that, period. So for us to be a meaningful contributor in this space, we have to radically disrupt that by being purposeful and building trust from the moment that we begin. It means we're deeply embedded in the community, going back into the social embeddedness piece. It means that we are deeply embedded in the community, that we're working with them, we're creating opportunity to amplify what they're doing. And then the last one is digital readiness. This idea that all of the things that we were talking about, how do you know how to access your doctor? Do you know how to get onto Zoom? Do you know how to, even something as simple as turning on your computer? There are lots of folks around the state who don't know how to do that. And so they don't know how to search for the things that are interesting. For them, by the way, not by us, but search for the things that would be of interest. People don't use the internet because they don't necessarily think it's relevant. They don't think that it adds value to their lives. When we asked a woman the other day what she wanted to use the internet for, her story was, and I wish I had a picture of her, I thought about it after. Her story was that her doctor had told her that her health was declining and that she could eat foods and that would help her health. So the one thing that she asked her digital navigator to help her with was better understanding the foods that she could eat and how she could cook those to start to feel better. So she got the app that's the one where you take a picture of a plant and it tells you how to grow that plant. Do you guys know this thing? I'm terrible with plants, but I love the idea of a plant or an app that tells you how to do it. So she got this app, she started taking pictures. She learned that beets were a thing that would help the particular way that her health was declining. So she planted beets. She worked with the community to plant a community garden. They grew plants together. They took a cooking class, an online cooking class via the devices that they were provided. And they learned how to cook beets. And she learned how to make smoothies. And she learned how to do all of these things that over time, and it was a period of just a couple of months, helped her to feel better. And I said, okay, that was the thing that you wanted to do. She said, yes, but the reason she wanted to do it was because she wanted to be able to better contribute to her community. So now they have this like whole community that's based around a garden. And it was because someone listened and said, how do you want to use the internet? How would it be helpful to you? Not how would it be helpful because I say it's helpful in this way, but really said, how would this be useful to you? Now she really wants to learn PowerPoint so she could show her grandkids that she can do cool stuff. Like that is her whole new plan, which I love. So that's her next strategy. But digital readiness comes in all forms, and it is something as simple as how do you turn on your computer and creating a judgment-free, safe place to helping someone go from not understanding and engaging to meaningfully engaging in the way that actually makes sense and adds value to their lives as perceived by them. I think I just skipped one at the bottom, but that's okay. So we also have the utilization gap, which means that once people have access and people know how to use the internet, are they actually using it? And so to get at this and to understand what we mean by using it, we think of all of the different places where the internet is likely used. So it's everywhere in K-12. It's for jobs, higher education, healthcare, civic engagement, citizen services. But all of these things are interconnected, right? So as you're thinking about this as data scientists and people who work with the data, how is it all interconnected? That's a real question. Like, how is it all interconnected? Because we can talk about this from an ecosystem standpoint, right? Because all of these things are interrelated. There is a pathway and a pipeline, and people go through these processes, whether it is in a linear way or they jump around. All of it is connected. And as we're thinking about what we do as it relates to the internet and digital equity, we have to consider all of it. Because if we're talking to a family, they might have kiddos who need to get access to school. They might have jobs that have transitioned to online opportunities and they couldn't engage because they didn't know how. They might not be able to talk to their parents because they don't have a device that enables them to do voice calling or whatever it is in a way that actually makes sense for them. And so we have to think about it in that way. And we also have to think about the future proofing piece of it. How many of you do future casting? or who work in that space at all? I would love to talk to people about that, because part of what we need to do is think not what does it look like right now, but what does it look like in the 5 years into the future, 10 years into the future? How do we plan for that to make sure that whatever we build with the community today sets them up for success over time? And how do we create opportunities to be super nimble so that we're not stuck in the thing that we build today? Because people will grow, they will learn quickly. And so making sure that we have things that can exist, and it becomes tremendously important. So you all are data people, and I want to ask you to think about this throughout the rest. And I typically use this slide at the very end of this, but I want to sort of put this seed out there for you right now, because I'm humbly asking for your help, which is, as we think about the data, part of what we need to do is understand how things are going, right? We can't just say we're going to do things, engage in activity, stand things up, build things, and then not measure how things are going. And we have to be able to do that often. We have to look at it from every angle that we possibly can. We have to be 30,000 feet up looking, and we have to be deeply within it to say, okay, did we do this correctly? Where is there opportunity for improvement? We have to think about risk. And are we potentially putting people in harm's way unintentionally? How do we mitigate for that? This keeps me up at night. It's a big thing that we're doing in a really short amount of time. So when we think about data, how do we make sure that we have ecosystems in place that address monitoring and evaluation? How do we look at efficacy of all of the different pieces that comprise this work? And then at the end of the day, everybody familiar with the theory of change? Okay. The theory of change is the thing that we use that basically says, if we do this, then this will be the outcome. So in this instance, I was giving a training the other day for a group of state leaders. And one of them, rightly so, had asked me, how do you know if you've been successful? And, I think that they were looking for a quantitative measure. That was the answer. They were looking for a specific thing that I could point to. And my actual answer was, we measure it in lives changed. So when I say lives changed, that seems very nebulous. And lives change as perceived by the people that we intend to serve, right? So what does that look like? How the heck do we get at that? Like, what perception metric do we use? How do we quantitatively, thank you very much. How do we get at that in a way that's really meaningful? So I want you just to think about that, because I'm going to ask you at the end. So all of the different pieces as we're talking about digital equity sort of land on a couple of things. You all touched on this one, right? Connectivity, fast, reliable, affordable internet, making sure that everyone has access to it. For what things? For work, for school, for healthcare, for services, across the entirety of this crazy state. Arizona is a very unique state because we are so big. We are massive. We have 22 tribal nations. We have whole swaths of land where people just don't live. We have rural systems where people still lack access to water, to electricity, where people don't have cars, where you have to go 2 hours to get to a place where you can have an X-ray. And if you don't have a car and the road doesn't work, that becomes really challenging. So telehealth there becomes really, really important. And we're helping to design the ecosystems that get at that, right? But thinking about the complexity of that, those are the challenges that you all who work in this data space, part of it falls to you. How do we build it? How do we design it? How do we measure whether it's going well? Devices. When we talk about this stuff, it's digital equity ecosystems. Ecosystems are made up of access first. It's sort of like the scaffolding process, right? So once you have access to the internet, once you have the reliable, affordable, high-speed internet, you need an internet-enabled device to engage. And it needs to be the right fit for the right person, right? If you have a small phone, it's probably hard for someone who has sight challenges. If you have a small device, it's probably not the right device for a child to learn on. If you have, any number of things. So think about that from your perspective, because I could give a bunch of examples, but your lens is really important. can't have data limits, has to have a refresh plan. You guys work in data and computers, things break. We need a way for, if they break, somebody for people to call, a way for them to come back and say, this broke, my kid threw it, I dropped it. Things break all the time. Addressing that is really important, because if you're a person who's dealing with affordability challenges, if you're in the lowest socioeconomic status, how can you afford to go get a new device? How can you pay for, all of the things that go with that? Literacy, we talk about this a lot. The language really matters. When I say digital literacy, I think that this word needs to be changed, because the opposite of literacy is illiterate, or literate is illiterate. And I think if you're talking about vulnerable populations, coming in with the idea that someone is illiterate when they might be quite highly functional in lots of aspects of their lives is not necessarily the greatest place to start. And so figuring out how do we look at this in a way that says, okay, this is one aspect that you might not be proficient in just yet, but we will get there, and we can get there quickly. And so helping people go from not fully engaging or not knowing or feeling comfortable to engaging often and with confidence in a way that adds value to their lives as perceived by them, that's the piece that we really want to do. And all of this stuff, like the digital literacy piece, it has to tie to access to education, access to 21st century jobs, jobs in sustainability, future work jobs, skills of the future. So how do we build that into the ecosystem that we make available? Because all of it is about digital equity, right? Digital equity isn't just I make something available. Here's a computer, it's got a program on it, watch it, you're good. That isn't going to be the thing that works, right? So we have to think about how do we make the right thing available for the right person in a judgment-free space where they can get access to things that are actually meaningful to them. And then how do we get the support systems that work? Community embedded liaisons, folks that are actually part of the community. There are trusted sources already where people can go and just get more information whenever they need it. And then the tech support folks, those are the people that you can call, you can chat, you can email when you have access to email. But phone support becomes incredibly important. And jobs. Okay, so as we're thinking about this, so this is another part where it's going to get interactive, and I'm realizing I'm getting short on time. I warned him I like to talk. Okay, so what we're trying to get to is improved quality of life. We're measuring success in lives changed, right? So think about that piece, as perceived by the community. So as we're designing qualitative and quantitative mechanisms by which to assess how things are going, we have to understand that the impact piece, like there are outcomes that we're trying to get to that are, anyways, impact we're trying to get to is lives changed. We have to understand the barriers and challenges that exist and persist. We know a lot of them: affordability, believing something is relevant, access, the stuff that we talked about before. And where do opportunities exist? With whom? How? How can they scaffold into one another? All of this requires, let me stop very quickly. So I firmly believe that everyone has a superpower, right? It's the thing, it's not necessarily what you do for a living. It's not necessarily the thing that you were trained in. It is the thing that you excel at better than anything else. When I ask this question, lots of times people say to me that it is bringing people together. Like their superpower is bringing together communities. What's your superpower? Yes, you. Perfect. What's your superpower? Nice. What's your superpower? You? It absolutely is a superpower. What's your superpower? Uh-huh. Communication. So everybody has this thing that is their superpower, right? So because these are ecosystems, it takes everyone identifying their individual and organizational superpowers and doing that thing, right? If you're going to work in the digital equity space, it's saying, how do I use the thing that I do really, really well to move a mountain in this space, because there are many mountains and the hills to climb are steep, and we never need everyone like jumping in and getting into this work. And so thinking about how you can leverage your unique superpower to address the barriers and challenges and find these opportunities and work collaboratively. There is no opportunity where we can just be like, oh, they'll get this done over there. Like, this is one of the world's greatest challenges. This will be the thing, the digital divide. It's not new. How many people heard this like frame or phrase 10 years ago? Raise your hand. All right, it's interactive. So we've spent like $1 billion on this, and 1% of change, which means we didn't do it right. We didn't do it well. There was something that was missing. This time there is $42 billion coming just on the broadband side. There's a whole nother huge bucket of money that's coming on the digital equity side. If that isn't spent well and cooperatively among all of the folks who are doing this for all the right reasons from a well-intended space, it will be a whole lot of money poorly spent. I can say that again. Like, if we don't do this well and super collaboratively, if we don't have people walking in lockstep, leveraging their unique superpowers, it will be a whole lot of money poorly spent, and we will not move the needle. We will have this digital divide that becomes a chasm. We'll have people who are completely left out if we don't address it right now, because the pace at which technology is advancing and the frequency with which we are using technology is accelerating. We have to be able to do this for all of the covered populations. Covered populations is the language that is used by NTIA, which is commerce, but it includes everyone from historically marginalized communities, racial and ethnic minorities, women and girls, the elderly, people who are veterans, people who are incarcerated, people on tribal nations, people in rural and remote parts of the state, and people with disabilities, intellectual and physical. So getting at it, so as you're like thinking about all the things that we need to measure and assess, all of the different covered populations, and those things don't exist in silos, right? We need to look at it through an intersectional lens. So getting at intersectionality and the complexities of vulnerability. I care a lot about this. But getting at it through all of like that lens, thinking about how do we do all of this work across the entirety of the state for all of these people in a way that is absolutely meaningful and addresses the chasm that is becoming the digital divide. It takes superpowers, right? And the served and unserved. There's a difference there, like the speed that people have to be considered access to broadband, and you know that says whether you actually have access or don't have access. There are projects that are engaged, that ASU is engaged in one of them, a mapping pilot. Some of you might be familiar with it. And the other piece is community engagement, meaningfully community engagement, like listening sessions, planning meetings where the community is saying what digital equity looks like. That shouldn't come from us. It shouldn't come from a bubble. It shouldn't come from a group on high. The living experts, the folks who are being left out and historically have been left out, those are the folks whose voices need to be amplified, not ours. Digital inequity impacts humans. It's the humans who are experiencing this. If we're going to get at it or contribute in any way that adds value, that's the thing that we really need to make sure that we're understanding. So the community, and I recognize I'm using that term loosely, we're talking about just the humans, right? The individual humans who are part of this. Together, they make up a community. A community exists in all kinds of forms. We shouldn't be defining that either. We should be creating space for all kinds of communities to exist. Okay, so with all of that stuff, that was light, breezy. So please, what does it look like when we've achieved our goals? All of those considerations. And mind you, the answers that you're providing right now, this is part of a feedback loop that we've purposefully built. It is the insights that you're providing. This is part of data collection that we're already doing. It will help us to ask different questions. It'll make sure that you as a stakeholder community are represented in this process. I also want to make sure that if you want to be part of this work and engage in this work, the invitation absolutely exists. There is space for every one of your superpowers. People have what they need, a special place, Oh, I love seeing the word human in there. Supportive. Yeah. I could just like sit over here with my coffee and society improved. Everyone perceives they have access to it. Does this resonate with you guys? Yeah? Democracy. Hoorah. Removing the barriers. So the level of specificity that exists here, the detail that you went into, this is beautiful. This is, how many people really want to be part of this now? Oh, come on. I have 3. Okay, one more question. I think it's one more question. Hi, Mom. I love that. Maybe one more question. Okay, just to, ooh. Oh. So one of the ways that ASU is doing this from a data perspective already is we're doing a mapping pilot. The mapping pilot looks at some of the typical data sets from which this information is gathered, including UCLA and the FCC. And so basically what we were doing is saying, is what is purported to exist actually what exists? And how do we look at all of it together? And then how do we find the gaps, right? And so I didn't want to go into too much detail, but there is a significant difference between what, I'm going to say this in the right way, what is purported to exist as it relates to speed and access, and then what actually exists. The difference is shocking. And so it's also, it's like a superpower in and of itself, right? The data that lives within this can get us to the place of, hey, city that this was conducted in, these are the gaps that currently exist. How do we create the mechanisms by which to help get access to these folks? And then how do we get funding? Because funding goes to and underserved. And so this is the difference, by the way. If you want to see any of these, I'm happy to share the full deck with you. These are metrics by which we typically look at this, just considering it. There is a whole lot more than this. The data, we're in the process of creating a digital equity index and atlas. Right now, I think it's 18 layers deep that we're working with. And we would love the insights and input from people on this team. Okay, so KPIs, impact, assessment, here we go. So this is the last one. You as experts in this space, depending on the thing about which you focus on most, tell me what things do we need to measure? What might we not have considered? Or what might we be using already and we just need reliability in the data? So one last one, please. By the way, all of our surveys that we've created thus far and the qualitative way that we're engaging with folks, it's completely iterative. So the insights that you provide here today will guide how we do this in the future. So if there's something that we might be getting wrong or might not be thinking about, do the people see it as a priority? Great, right? Yeah. Stories. I love the idea of stories. All right. These are going to keep coming in. One last question while you're adding here, just if you could add one more answer. How do we measure lives changed? Add one more answer. Just think about that for 1 second. If you're not typing, please type. How do we measure lives changed? You can think about it and send me an email separately. But that's the thing at the end of the day we need to make sure that we get right. Thank you much. I appreciate your time, and I hope to get to work with all of you in the near future. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Erin. That was wonderful, man. I love the connection of what we do every day with our data, but she's really bringing it to such a human level. So thank you for that, Erin. Really good start to this. All right, so we are off and running, like Erin is with the clicker. And we've got sessions to go to. So I'm gonna just put, we've got sessions to go to. You've got them at your, with the printouts there. You've got sessions today, lunch on your own today. We'll see you back here at lunch tomorrow after your session. So thank you, take some food, go to your sessions, and I'll see you throughout the day. Take care.